all training personnel. 1, 2, 2.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome all of you to the Seminole County Sheriff's Office Training Center. My name is Lou Tomio, and I'm the undersheriff here at the Seminole County Sheriff's Office. We're excited to have our newest deputy sheriffs here with us today to be sworn in and have the opportunity for their family members to pin the badge on them. Before we get started with the ceremony, I'd like to introduce the command staff that are here today. I'll introduce, of course, the sheriff. I'll introduce him in a minute. We have Chief Dan Purcell, Chief Mark Conway. Where'd Captain Shaw go? There's Captain Ron Shaw. Captain Cornelius Blue is here. We have our region commanders here, Lieutenant Andrew Thomas, Lieutenant Crystal Foley, Lieutenant Bobby Smith, and some of our sergeants here, Pat Smith and Brendan Leroy. Also, I'd like to welcome our 2 training coordinators, Sergeants Corey Kelty and Kristen Bates. Thank you, everyone, for being here. At this point, I'd like to introduce Sheriff Lee to come up and share a few words and present the oath to our new deputy sheriff.
Well, thank you so much, Under Sheriff. That was a long walk, and I tell you, the swearing-in ceremony looks a lot different now than what it's ever looked like in the past. And I suspect that you're going to take these photographs of when you're sworn in and you're going to share it with your children and family members, and they're going to say, what in the world was this ceremony about? As I suspect many kids who are graduating from college and high school will do. But, you know, this is such a symbolic and important ceremony, even in an international pandemic. We felt that it was so important for us to experience this bond and joining of our fraternity here. Some of you are members of the Sheriff's Office already. Others have had law enforcement experience, but all have had life experience. And I think that that's what we search for when we're looking for the right fit for a Seminole County Sheriff's Office member. And in this particular scenario, Seminole County Deputy Sheriff. You know, we feel and recognize that the responsibility that we have placed upon us is one of the greatest responsibilities that any civilized society can ever bestow on an individual. You know, to quite literally have people's faith and trust placed in our hands day in and day out is a remarkable process in itself, and it requires to select the right type of people that can take on that responsibility. So I congratulate each of you because, as you know, or may not know, there's a lot of people who apply for the positions that never make it to the processing. There's a lot of people who have spent a considerable amount of their professional life working towards joining an agency, becoming a part of a fraternity, and coming together in common interest to really preserve the quality of life of our citizens day in and day out. And although we see this narrative across the country that looks much different than at least it's looked in my lifetime, I'm still grateful to work in a community with people who understand that professionalism and integrity and actually helping people and showing altruism is core to our overall mission of what we do. And actually, biologically, it is a process that releases endorphins, and it just makes you feel good about yourself. And every time I sit with a applicant of the Seminole County Sheriff's Office and I ask, why did you pick us? Typically, the response that you have given me and our team centers around community policing. It centers around making a difference and having a positive impact and all of those things that we think and know are good in just about our occupation. I always take this opportunity to talk a little bit about the historic value of the office of sheriff And again, we've got family members here that are strategically placed in like a fighter wing position behind their loved one that's being sworn in. We have other people who are watching on video. Where is the camera at? Right here?
Yes, sir.
That doesn't look like a camera, but it's a camera that will watch kind of remotely. But if you can bear with me just for a couple of minutes, I do recognize that the office of sheriff is one of the oldest known existing offices in our country. Actually, when you look and read the Magna Carta, the responsibilities of the office of sheriff is mentioned 8 times in the Magna Carta. And when you look at the evolution of the office of sheriff, you find our roots date back to early English settlement, where kings would have rules of jurisdictional boundaries. There wasn't just one king of England at the time. Kings would rule shires, and there were multiple shires in England as we know it today. But as long as people have cohabitated together, there has always been people who are willing to cause trouble. And there needed to be a guardian that helped the king maintain order and control and take on some additional responsibilities, as it were at the time, of collecting taxes and holding ceremonies and summoning other people for help. Well, the king identified that person and called them the reeve. The reeve is a term that is used to describe guardian. So the king designated the reeve, ultimately the reeve of the shire, which became more Americanized in the 1600s, and the first shire reeve was established in the common area of Newport News, Virginia. The term reeve of the shire, shire reeve, became more Americanized over the years, and ultimately is the term sheriff as we know today. What's unique about the office of sheriff is there's no other law enforcement official in the country that is elected by the people to serve the people. This is why you can turn on the news and see a sheriff standing in full uniform on whatever cable news channel that you watch and see them saying a lot of things about a lot of different topics. And I sometimes say, half-jokingly, a sheriff can essentially say or do anything that they want to say or do, as long as it's not illegal or unethical. They just may not be able to do it for more than 4 years. Because one of the unique aspects of the sheriff is the people vote who their sheriff is. Again, different from any form of federal law enforcement that works for the president or members of the cabinet, any director of any state law enforcement agency that works for the governor and or the governor's cabinet, typically majority of the cabinet, or a chief of police that reports to a strong mayor or a city commissioner or commission or a city manager. The sheriff is responsible directly to the people. There are 4 fundamental responsibilities that a sheriff has here in Seminole County. And number 1, the sheriff is the chief law enforcement officer of the county. And that's a surprise to some people who may not study the Constitution, but the power is derived from the state constitution, and as a result, the sheriff is the chief law enforcement officer of the county, above all local, state, and federal law enforcement authority. Again, based on the premise of being elected and voted to serve and preserve the Constitution day in and day out. We've got a great and wonderful working relationship with all 7 municipalities and 8 police departments here in Seminole County, when you tally up the airport police department being one of those things, one of those groups. We all have common interests and we work well together. That's the first responsibility of the sheriff. The second responsibility of the sheriff, and a less known responsibility of the sheriff, is to be the chief administrative and executive officer of the circuit and county courts. That's a mouthful. What that means is the sheriff is responsible to provide security to the entire judiciary, which here in Seminole County we have 3 courthouse facilities where the sheriff is charged with providing safety to each one of our judges and each one of our courthouses, as well as our various county buildings. The second responsibility of the sheriff by the Constitution is to be the chief administrative and executive officer of the circuit and county courts. The civil process is a big part of that. The courts will order the sheriff to take care of the court's business, whether it's a risk protection order, replevin, any type of civil order that comes from the courts are then ordered to the sheriff to carry out that duty and responsibility. The third area of responsibility of a sheriff here in Seminole County is to be the chief correctional officer of the county. And here in Seminole County, we recognize our responsibility in that role extends well beyond providing care, custody, and control. We quite literally feel that we can change people's lives while they're incarcerated. At least we're going to do everything that we can to try to do that. I think that that is a fundamental expectation of a free society, that if you catch somebody breaking the law that lives down the street from me, please fix them before you release them back into my neighborhood. And I think our team is on the cutting edge, both local, state, and nationally, on addressing the underlying conditions that lead people to commit crime in the first place. This is why you will see us on the forefront when it comes to substance use disorder and mental health, and not only addressing rehabilitation, but habilitative programs. Because if you look at rehabilitation means make what it once was. We know that some were never right in the first place. Little boys and girls have no choice who their mommies and daddies are. So the third area of responsibility of a sheriff is to be the chief correctional officer of a county. Fourth, and probably most holistic and overreaching of full consolidation and involvement, is the sheriff is responsible to be the conservator of the peace. What does that mean? That means that it does not matter what jurisdiction a problem may occur in, the sheriff is ultimately responsible to ensure that peace is maintained in all areas of a county, both unincorporated and incorporated. And we do that through great partnerships with municipal police departments. But in the end of the day, if a city said, you know what, we are not interested in running a police department anymore, we can't afford to run a police department, and I underscore that would not happen here in Seminole County. But if it did, it would be the sheriff's constitutional responsibility to pick up primary law enforcement services in those areas. So, why the history lesson? Why identifying these four fundamental principles? Is because the law also says that the process of a sheriff deputizing a deputy sheriff is basically a ceremony of transitioning that power and authority to every person who raises their hand and takes an oath. So this ceremony that you will witness today, quite literally, is me taking those four fundamental responsibilities that are entrusted in me as the 10th sheriff in the history of Seminole County and transitioning them to you to act as my alter ego to fulfill those responsibilities day in and day out. I think it took me many, many years before I actually realized that when I was taking my hand and taking that oath and doing my job, that what was actually happening. You, in a very real way, are becoming the sheriff today through this ceremony. This is why that we have that authority, that we are very selective on who we pick to wear the uniform of the men and women of our office, and that's a little bit of the history and the significance of this ceremony. To the family members that are either here in person or watching virtually, we will love your family members the way that you have loved them at home. And I know that sounds very cliche and it seems like it's warm and comfortable, but when we raise our families, when we love our spouses, when we want the best for our loved ones, part of that is to work in an environment that is harmonious. To go into a potentially very dangerous working environment and know that somebody who's going to care as much about our loved ones as we do for them. And I promise you, I and our team will do that here at the Seminole County Sheriff's Office. Although over the years we've evolved into what many would consider a larger agency with 1,400 members and a $145 million annual operating budget, we still take on the philosophy and the perspective of a small mom and pop type of business, where on day one, you become equal partners in the company and corporation. Regardless of your rank or status or the amount of years that you've been here, on your first day, you become equal partners in what we do and what our charge is. And it is incredibly important for you to recognize that. What I found out a long time ago is people who are afraid don't make suggestions to make improvements. And any one of us that have been doing a certain job for a certain amount of time can risk the hazards of becoming what I call occupationally institutionalized. And sometimes coming in with a fresh eye and a fresh perspective, you can say, why do you do it like that? If you feel comfortable enough as part owner, you can say, why are you doing it like this? And if we're being honest, more often than not, we would answer that question by saying something like, we've always done it this way. Do you have a better idea? So I want you to feel comfortable coming in and having the ability to do that. I want to thank all of the people who worked hard to get you to this point, starting with your family members. Because I know that, as law enforcement officers, which many of you were already, the majority of you were here or part of this agency or coming from another agency, it takes a lot of work in order to arrive where you're at today. And families have to sacrifice a lot in order to do that. And you don't get into this business without getting into a family type of commitment. And I'd be remiss if I did not highlight the fact that although many of you have been law enforcement officers for quite a few years, you are the person that your family brags about when you're not around. Whether you're here or there, if you have family that live on the other side of the country, your family member will say, I've got a son or a daughter that works as a deputy sheriff in Seminole County, Florida. Anytime that they see a police officer on vacation, there's some dialogue, it's quite possible that you and your profession of choice will be mentioned in a very proud type of delivery for that. So, again, this is a family commitment, and I want to thank the family members that have really supported you and allowed you to join a part of this team. I promise you that we will train your loved one to the best of our ability and make sure that they're safe in their assignment and what they do day in and day out, because I know that that's a big focus for you. To our recruiting team, we've had such a remarkable recruitment effort led by Captain Ron Shaw. Many people are involved in that. It's not only recruiting, it's the processing of our men and women who work in our human resources division. They vet through the process. The first time we have an opportunity to determine our greatest qualified candidates is, quite frankly, through the feedback that comes from our human resource department. They know almost immediately when they see somebody whether or not they're going to be a good fit for this culture and this agency. So I want to commend them and thank them for their hard work and dedication. And then, of course, our training staff, led by many of the people who you've been introduced to here, and many that are not here because of social distancing requirements. They work so hard to not only train people to do business, but train people to believe in what we believe. The altruism and empathy and consideration of a Seminole County law enforcement officer that makes, I think, us a little bit unique in this space. So with that, again, congratulations, welcome, and we're going to do this a little bit differently. So I'm going to ask you here in a moment to stand, and I will administer the oath of office to you, swear you in. And then at the end and conclusion of that swearing in ceremony, I'll ask your family member or friend or somebody who you have here with you to actually pin that badge on your chest. Again, we typically do this in a ceremony where it's one person comes up, it's a formal introduction, but we'll do that right where you're seated. When I give the oath of office, I will say, state your name. And what we've done here as a tradition is we have each individual state their name individually, not everyone state their name together. So when I say state your name, You don't have to state your name. I will point to you and you'll just say your name and we will go. So with that, if you would please stand and prepare to take your oath of office. Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I,
Marcus Barry.
do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support, protect, and defend the Constitution and government of the United States and the state of Florida, that I will enforce the laws of the state of Florida and the ordinances of Seminole County, that I am duly qualified under the Constitution of the state to hold office, that I will well and faithfully carry out the duties of Seminole County Deputy Sheriff, for which I'm about to enter. So help me God. Congratulations, everyone. Now, at this time, I'd ask your family member to, we're just kind of winging this as we go, to stand up. You may, if they had the badges already. You have the badges already. This is something that gives some folks a lot of difficulty from time to time. And I'll let you know a little secret. There's a zipper in front of the shirt if you need to use it. So if you would come up and pin your loved one with the badge on their chest. Congratulations, everyone. Please have a seat. As I close out my comments here, trust me, you'll hear a lot from me over the next 6 months. You know, I'd be remiss if I did not recognize what that star represents that's on your chest now. For here in Seminole County, it represents a legacy that extends 108 years. But it's a symbol of hope and trust and camaraderie across our state of Florida. Doesn't matter what jurisdiction you're in, when people see that 5-point star, they know that there's a good person that is there to help them and somebody that they can rely on. Our job is to make sure that that is never tarnished and we preserve that long tradition. Every time I think about pinning that 5-point star on my chest, I think about those 6 heroes that have come before us and have made the ultimate sacrifice that we memorialize not only every year, but every day with the pinning of a Roman numeral on our uniform. Their names are arched in stone in front of our building at a monument. Their names appear in Judiciary Square in Washington, D.C. These are 6 heroes that were taken from us in the line of duty. Their work and their legacy carries on through our professional ability to do 2 things: be the best law enforcement officer that we can be, and in what somebody argue, extremely challenging times, and 2, to make sure that their legacy is never forgotten. We stand on the shoulders of giants to fulfill our commitment of what we do day in and day out. As you go into your training, come in with an open mind, a desire to learn, a willingness to embrace the concepts and philosophies that we come together in collaboration with all of those other like-minded individuals, whether they're public, private, or private citizens, to make sure that we're doing our part to enhance the quality of life for the citizens in Seminole County by reducing crime and the fear of crime for them day in and day out. I think now we're going to have some individual photographs of family members. Brittany, what is that going to look like? Are they just going to stand in front of the flag? Are we going to move things around in here? I want to thank you for all the work that you put into this. I know you work long and hard to make this happen as well. That does not surprise me at all. So I don't know if you're going to lead that process, or Sergeant Bates is going to lead that process. Who's in charge now is what I want to know.
I'll take care of it. Guys,
Okay.
if you would go ahead and stand up and go ahead and stack the chairs. Family members, if you wouldn't mind. Oh, you guys are